The Reluctant Touch. The floating palace of Aurelia hung suspended above clouds the color of brushed copper, held aloft by gravitational anchors that hummed with ancient technology. Kyle Maris stepped off the transport shuttle with his toolkit in hand, trying not to think about the fact that he was about to meet the most feared ruler in 3 star systems. The Empress Velrith Salvena had personally requested a human technician. No one knew why. A silent escort led him through corridors of polished obsidian in liquid crystal displays showing star maps of conquered territories. Each step echoed. Each echo felt like a countdown. The armory doors opened soundlessly. She stood with her back to him, illuminated by the ethereal light filtering through the transparent dome overhead. Her ceremonial exosuit gleamed, a masterwork of form and function, dark metal traced with lines of pale blue energy. Even without turning, her presence filled the vast space. "You're smaller than I expected," Velrith said, her voice like wind over glass. "I'm average height for a human, Empress," Kyle managed. She turned, and he forgot how to breathe. Her skin held a faint luminescence, like moonlight on water. Those violet eyes studied him with an intensity that felt both clinical and curious. "Begin," she commanded simply. Kyle approached the suit mounted on its display frame, pulling out his calibration scanner. The shoulder mechanism had microfractures in the joint servos, stress damage from combat. He'd need to access the internal assembly. "You'll need you to wear it," he said quietly. "The biosync won't engage otherwise." Velrith stepped into the suit with fluid grace. The armor closed around her like a second skin, responding to her neural patterns. She stood perfectly still as Kyle climbed a work platform to reach the damaged shoulder joint. His hands trembled slightly as he opened the access panel. The delicate wiring inside carried enough voltage to stop his heart if he made a mistake. "Steady," he whispered to himself. He reached into the mechanism, adjusting the microservo coupling. Too far. The platform swayed beneath his feet. He lost balance, falling forward. Her hand caught his wrist before he could tumble. The grip was firm, but careful, pulling him gently against the cold plating of her armor. He found himself inches from her face, close enough to see his reflection in those prismatic eyes. "You tremble, human," Velrith murmured, still holding his wrist. "Why?" "I'm afraid, Empress." "Of me?" He nodded wordlessly. Something flickered across her expression, not anger, but something softer, sadder. She released his wrist, but didn't step back. "I am afraid, too," she said quietly, the confession seeming to surprise even her. "Every day I fear failing my people. I fear that the strength they see in me is merely an illusion I've perfected. I fear—" She paused, those violet eyes searching his face. "I fear that I will always be alone in this armor, surrounded by those who kneel, but never truly see me." Kyle forgot about the broken servo, the treaty negotiations, the weight of empires. In that moment, she wasn't the Empress of Aurelia. She was simply someone achingly lonely, reaching across an impossible distance. "I see you," he heard himself say. The armory doors burst open. Velrith's advisor, a tall Aurelian with silver facial markings, stopped abruptly at the sight of them standing so close. "Empress, the council awaits your presence." The moment shattered. Velrith's expression cooled, the vulnerability vanishing behind practiced composure. But as she walked away, she glanced back once. That glance stayed with Kyle long into the night. Fractured protocols. The summons came at dawn. Kyle had spent the night in modest quarters within the palace's guest wing, unable to sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Velrith's face, That moment of raw honesty when her carefully constructed walls had cracked just enough to let him glimpse the person beneath the crown. Now her personal attendant stood at his door, expressionless. The Empress requires additional calibrations. Kyle gathered his tools, knowing full well the suit hadn't needed further adjustments. He found her in a different chamber this time, a private workshop filled with holographic star charts and tactical displays. She stood before a window overlooking the cloud sea, still wearing portions of her armor. The exosuit's gauntlets lay discarded on a nearby table. The left wrist actuator feels imprecise. I need it perfect for the summit demonstrations. Kyle perched carefully, examining the actuator in question. It functioned flawlessly. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to her bare arm. She extended it towards him. His fingers brushed her skin as he checked the neural connection points. Warm, surprisingly soft despite the luminescence of her skin. He felt her pulse quicken under his touch. "Tell me about Earth," she said suddenly. "I've read reports, but reports are hollow things. What is it truly like?" Kyle continued working, grateful for something to focus on besides the electric awareness of her proximity. Green. So much green, it almost hurts your eyes after living in transit stations. There are these forests near where I grew up. Ancient trees so tall you can't see their tops. When it rains, the whole world smells like life. "Rain," Velrith repeated softly. "We have acidic precipitation on Aurelia. It scars the land rather than nourishing it. Is that why you fight so hard? To give your people something better?" She was quiet for a long moment. "I fight because I was taught that strength is the only language the universe understands. My mother ruled for 200 cycles before her rivals poisoned her. My father lasted 3 cycles before his own generals betrayed him. I learned early that trust is a luxury empires cannot afford." Kyle looked up from his work. "That sounds exhausting." A bitter smile touched her lips. "It is." The days blurred together. Each morning brought another summons, another fabricated reason for Kyle's presence. They talked while he worked, about art and war, loneliness and duty, the weight of expectations neither had chosen. On the 5th night, Veldrith dismissed her guards entirely. They stood alone in her private garden, a hidden sanctuary beneath a crystalline dome. Bioluminescent plants cast everything in shades of blue and silver. Water trickled somewhere in the darkness, a sound like whispered secrets. "I've never brought anyone here," Velrith admitted, walking between the glowing flora. "This is the only place where I can remove my armor and simply exist." "It's beautiful," Kyle said, following her down a winding path. She stopped beside a pool of still water that reflected the stars visible through the dome above. Her fingers traced the edge of a flowering vine that pulsed with gentle light. "May I ask you something?" Her voice was hesitant, uncertain, in a way he'd never heard. "Something that may seem strange." "Of course." Kyle turned to face her fully. Slowly, deliberately, she removed her remaining armor pieces until she stood before him in simple dark clothing, vulnerable, human almost, despite the luminescent quality of her skin, in the violet depth of her eyes. "You have commanded armies," she said quietly, "negotiated treaties that reshaped star systems, but I've never—" She extended her hand palm up. "May I touch you? Your hand. I want to understand what simple contact feels like when there's no barrier between us, when it's not political or strategic, but just human," Kyle supplied gently. "Real," she finished. He placed his hand in hers. The contact sent warmth flooding through him. Her fingers were long, elegant, and they trembled slightly as they curled around his. She studied their joined hands with an expression of wonder, as though witnessing something miraculous. "Your skin is warmer than mine," she observed, "and here," she traced the lines on his palm with one fingertip, "you have these marks of your life. Everyone has them. Not everyone." She met his eyes. "My people are born with smooth palms. We don't carry evidence of our journeys on our skin." Kyle turned her palm over, running his thumb across her palm. "Maybe you carry them somewhere else, inside, where others can't see." Her breath caught. They stood there, hands joined, the garden's soft light painting them in shades of dreams. Velrith leaned closer, her free hand rising to hover near his face, not quite touching. The Garden of Broken Trust. Kale didn't receive a summons the next morning, or the morning after that. For 3 days, silence. He completed routine maintenance work on other palace systems, always hoping to catch a glimpse of Velrith in the corridors. The few times he saw her, she was surrounded by advisors and visiting dignitaries, her face an unreadable mask of imperial authority. On the 4th evening, a sealed message appeared in his quarters. No signature, just coordinates and a time. Midnight. The private garden. He went, even knowing he shouldn't. Velrith waited beneath the bioluminescent trees, wearing flowing dark robes instead of armor. Without the exosuit's intimidating presence, she looked smaller somehow, more vulnerable. She turned at his approach, and the carefully maintained composure cracked. "They've forbidden me from seeing you privately," she said without preamble. "My chancellor believes our connection undermines my authority, that it makes me appear weak before the summit. Do you agree?" "I don't know what I believe anymore." She gestured for him to walk with her along the glowing pathways. "For 20 cycles, I've ruled alone. I've made decisions that cost thousands of lives because they were strategically necessary. I've never questioned my purpose. And now? Now I find myself counting the hours until I might see you again. Now I dismiss council meetings because your voice echoes in my thoughts." She stopped walking, turning to face him with raw honesty in her eyes. "Now I'm terrified, because everything I was taught about strength feels like a beautiful lie." Kale stepped closer. "What if strength isn't about standing alone? What if it's about choosing who stands with you?" "Every alliance I've ever made has ended in betrayal," Velrith said, her voice barely above a whisper. "My mother's closest advisor was the one who poisoned her wine. My father's most trusted general led the coup that killed him. I learned to sleep in my armor because vulnerability is just another word for weakness in my world." "I'm not from your world." She laughed, but it sounded broken. "No. You're from a place with rain and forests and trust. How do I explain to someone like you what it means to rule an empire built on blood? How do I—" Kale reached out and took her hand, the same simple contact they'd shared days before. "You don't have to explain anything. I know who you are. I see the weight you carry. And I'm still here." Velrith's fingers tightened around his. "Why? Why would you risk being associated with someone the galaxy fears?" "Because when you asked why I trembled, you actually cared about the answer. Because you showed me your garden. Because underneath all that armor and protocol and imperial necessity, you're someone who understands loneliness as deeply as I do." She pulled him closer, her other hand rising to rest against his chest. He could feel her heartbeat through the thin fabric of her robes, quick, uncertain, alive. "I've never felt this vulnerable. Or this alive. I don't know which terrifies me more." "Maybe they're the same thing." The distance between them disappeared. Velrith's hand slid from his chest to his shoulder, her fingers trembling. Kale cupped her face gently, feeling the warmth beneath the luminescent quality of her skin. Her eyes searched his, asking a question neither had words for.
He answered by leaning in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. Their lips met softly, tentatively, a first kiss that tasted like starlight and possibility. Velrith made a small sound, something between surprise and relief, her hand fisting in his shirt to pull him closer. The garden seemed to glow brighter around them, or perhaps that was just how the moment felt, luminous and impossible and perfectly real. When they finally parted, Velrith rested her forehead against his, eyes closed. This changes everything. I know. The summit is in 6 days. Every faction will be watching for weakness. If they know The explosion cut her off. The western section of the palace erupted in flames, visible even through the garden's dome. Alarms shrieked. The ground shook beneath their feet. Velrith's training took over instantly. She pulled away from Kale, her expression shifting from vulnerable to commanding in a heartbeat. "Stay behind me." Armed figures in dark combat suits materialized from the shadows between the trees, assassins who'd somehow breached the palace's defenses. 5 of them, weapons trained on Velrith. The Empress dies tonight. The summit dies with her. Velrith stepped forward, unarmed and unarmored. "You'll have to do better than..." Kale saw the sniper's laser sight paint her chest a fraction of a second before the shot fired. He didn't think. He lunged, throwing himself in front of her as energy discharged. The blast caught him across the ribs, sending him sprawling. Pain erupted through his side like liquid fire. Through blurring vision, he saw Velrith's face transform into something terrible and beautiful, pure rage. She moved like violence given form, disarming the nearest assassin and using his weapon to eliminate the others with brutal precision. It was over in seconds. Then she was kneeling beside Kale, her hands pressing against his wound, her composure, finally, completely shattered. "You fool! You beautiful, impossible fool! Why would you..." "Told you," Kale managed through gritted teeth. "I see you." Tears tracked down her luminescent face as guards flooded the garden. "No one has ever protected me before. No one." "Get used to it," he whispered. Then the pain pulled him under into darkness. The last thing he felt was her hand holding his, refusing to let go even as medical teams surrounded them.
Hearts and hierarchies. Kale woke to soft light and the steady pulse of medical equipment. His side ached with a deep, burning pain, but when he tried to move, a gentle hand pressed against his shoulder. "Don't," Velrith's voice, rough from exhaustion. "The healers said you need at least another day before the tissue fully regenerates." He turned his head on the pillow. She sat beside his bed, still wearing the same dark robes from the garden, now stained with his blood. Her hair hung loose around her shoulders, and her eyes were red-rimmed. "How long?" he asked. 18 hours. I haven't left. The summit can wait." Her fingers found his, intertwining carefully. "I canceled 3 council meetings and ignored 7 urgent messages from allied delegations. My chancellor is convinced I've lost my mind." "Maybe you have," Kale said softly, managing a weak smile. "Perhaps." She lifted his hand to her cheek, closing her eyes. "When I saw you fall, when I thought I might lose you before I'd even truly found you, something inside me broke, Kale. Or maybe it finally healed. I can't tell the difference anymore." The door hissed open. Velrith's chancellor entered, flanked by 2 senior advisors, their expressions varying degrees of disapproval. "Empress, this has gone too far," the chancellor said sharply. "The humans' heroics aside, your absence from critical summit preparations is causing concern among the delegations. They question your commitment to the treaty." "Then they can question." I'm not leaving him. You're the Empress of Aurelia. You don't have the luxury of personal attachments, especially not to... Careful. Velrith's voice dropped to something dangerous. Choose your next words very carefully. The Chancellor's jaw tightened. The factions already whisper that you've been compromised, that a human has weakened your resolve. If you appear at the summit with him by your side, it will confirm every doubt about your fitness to rule. My fitness to rule has never been in question. It is now. One of the advisors stepped forward, her voice gentler but no less urgent. Empress, we've served your house loyally. We want what's best for Aurelia. This relationship, it endangers everything we've worked to build. The treaty, the peace, your throne. Kale tried to sit up, ignoring the pain. Velrith, maybe they're... No. She squeezed his hand. I've spent 20 cycles doing what was best for everyone else, making impossible choices, sacrificing pieces of myself until I forgot what remained. She looked at her advisors. Love isn't weakness. Connection isn't compromise. And if my people cannot accept that their empress is also a person with a heart, then perhaps I've failed them in ways that have nothing to do with treaties. Love? The Chancellor's eyes widened. You barely know this human.